I'm astounded at that last contribution to the House. It's like the Labor Party, in true Labor Party style, when they come into government and complain about something that we didn't do when they blocked us continuously when we were in government. The hypocrisy of those on the other side of the House leaves me speechless. But I'll move on because I do have a lot to say. When we were in government, we brought these measures to the parliament because we believe in combating foreign bribery. Now, why is this important? Well, we live in a very uncertain world right now. The Australian Parliament, when we were in government, we committed to spending $210 billion. That's $billion with a B on critical defence procurement, whether it's aircraft, whether it's vehicles, whether it's ships, whether it's submarines. There is no doubt that we are living in the most geopolitically unstable period since 1945. And the Australian government, along with a lot of other governments around the world, are spending a lot of money on defence, understandably so. And why is this bill so important, Mr Deputy Speaker? It is so important, and the best example of why it is so important is a deferred prosecution brought by the US Justice Department against Airbus, which fined Airbus a record $3.9 billion for actions that Airbus have taken to effectively bribe US and foreign officials to win and maintain defence contracts. Now, just remember that, $3.9 billion. It's the largest fine ever, and it was done under a deferred prosecution agreement. Now, the Crimes Legislation Amendment, Combating Foreign Bribery Bill, will further the aims of when we were in government to strengthen the legal framework for prosecuting foreign bribery. And I'm not disappointed to see this bill come before the House. I am disappointed to see the political gamesmanship that is being brought by the other side. I'm not complaining that they're copying our homework. It's the best form of flattery is imitation, but they have left some very important parts out of this bill. Those members opposite need to reconsider the importance of adding deferred prosecution scheme to make the enforcement of foreign bribery offences more effective. We're committed to moving those amendments, and we ask those opposite to wake up to themselves, stop playing petty politics, and accept those amendments. The fight against bribery and corruption is something that the coalition has been dedicated to and focused on for decades. Members opposite came to government in the last election on a platform of integrity and accountability. But when push comes to shove, they are not prepared to do what is right. They are not prepared to put their money where their mouth is and introduce legislation which provides for that sort of integrity, accountability and transparency. In 1999, we introduced Australia's first foreign bribery offences into the criminal code, we being the opposition. In the Howard years, we ratified the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. In 2017, we introduced the very measures that we are debating today. Between Labor's petty politics and the 2019 federal election, those measures lapsed. But we believe in the fight against bribery and against corruption. That's why we reintroduced those measures in 2019. We were confronted again by Labor's political games. Time and again, Labor touts themselves as the be-all and end-all for transparency. Now, this federal Labor government are clearly plotting the same course as the Queensland Labor government, and that is to hide and obfuscate. These measures should already be the law of the land, but Labor did everything it could to delay action on foreign bribery. Their approach to these measures has been nothing short of incompetent and nothing less than obfuscation. Their last public hearing during the previous parliament shows it plain and simple. Now, the Labor Party wanted to put on hold legislation to address serious white-collar crime, and that was demonstrated in the last parliament in a parliamentary inquiry. Labor's dissenting report to that inquiry recommended removals of key parts of the bill. They spent the lifetime of two parliaments trying to derail this legislation, and then they spent 6 weeks in an election campaign arguing about integrity. Now in government, they are finally coming to the table. They're finally ready to redress white-collar crime after nearly 18 months in office. But they come with a weaker solution and an even weaker commitment to good government and real change. The government is nothing more than political phonies, and Australians see right through their nasty tricks and politics. The issue of foreign bribery, I'll take that interjection from the member for Wills, because they are doing not quite yet, although I know that you'd like to be there, but then you wouldn't have to put up with me in the PJCIS. The issue of foreign bribery is one which goes to the heart of foreign interference and foreign influence in this country. It's not just a matter of corporate crime. It's a matter for politicians and political parties. It's a matter for government, a matter for bureaucracy. It's a matter for all Australians, families and their businesses. What makes it a challenge to address is that red tape and complex corporate arrangements make it difficult to get to the bottom of cases and to enforce wrongdoing. When we tabled the bill last time when we were in government, we said that the opaque and sophisticated nature of corporate crime can make it difficult to identify and easy to conceal through complicated structures and transactions. We said investigations into corporate misconduct can be hampered by the need to process large amounts of complex data, including evidence that may be held overseas. Court proceedings can be protracted, expensive and involve well-resourced corporate defendants. We said that the measures in the bill at the time seek to address these challenges and remove undue impediments to the successful investigation and prosecution of foreign bribery cases. It is the same now. The bill before us creates a new offence for corporations that fail to prevent foreign bribery, which carries a maximum penalty of $27.5 million. We absolutely must hold corporations to account when they squander Australians' goodwill, when they accept foreign bribes and abuse the trust of the Australian people by committing such offences. But harsh penalties and strongly worded legislation amounts to nothing if it can't be enforced. Labor have weakened this bill by precluding deferred prosecution agreements. A deferred prosecution agreement, also called a DPA, allows a prosecuting body to negotiate conditions with a defendant in exchange for deferral of a prosecution, potentially indefinitely. They often involve paying a significant fine and making changes to the way business is done. If the conditions aren't met, the prosecution can be re-enlivened. International consensus is that these agreements are an essential tool in the prosecution of foreign bribery. We saw that with the US Department of Justice and Airbus that I talked about earlier. $3.9 billion fine. And yet this government thinks, well, despite the United States having DPAs, the Attorney-General, he knows better. He knows better than a tried, proven and successful mechanism that is working seeing record penalties holding the corporate world to account in an environment where the world is awash with money being spent, particularly in the defence sector. The Law Council of Australia, Transparency International, even Austrade, an Australian government agency, agree that a DPA is necessary. They are an invaluable tool to punish offenders, deter offences and to disrupt complex and organised crimes where this would not necessarily be possible. Not only is enforcement difficult, but prosecution is incredibly hard. We're talking about multiple jurisdictions and sometimes multiple nations, as we saw with Airbus. We're talking about intensive investigations with deep forensic accounting, extensive paper trails, and oftentimes the need for specialist cyber investigation skills. And we're talking about the Australian government log-jammed, tied up and financially invested in protracted and uncertain litigation for years. A DPA is about more than efficiency. It's about efficacy and ensuring that Australia's justice system is functional. It's about actually holding people to account for their misconduct instead of just throwing their cases in the too hard basket. It's about countering foreign interference and influence to bolster our sovereignty and national security. Our own head of ASIO, the Inspector General of Security, has identified that foreign interference is the greatest threat posed to the security of this nation, and yet this lot, the government, don't want to introduce deferred prosecution agreements. It just beggars belief. What we have proposed is a requirement that before a DPA could be executed, a former judge would need to be satisfied that the terms of the agreement were fair, reasonable, proportionate and in the interests of justice. The Attorney-General himself made clear that this bill is meant to enhance implementation of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. However, in 2021, the OECD Council itself expressly recommended that foreign bribery provisions consider using non-trial resolutions to improve the prosecution of foreign bribery. How much evidence do they want? This is so typical of those opposite. They said it's about accountability, but fail to make the accountability mechanism functional. They say it's about enhancing compliance with the OECD Convention, but have opted not to include the one component they indicated would be most helpful. It's a simple solution, Mr Deputy Speaker, to a massive problem, and Labor have refused to support it. Because why? Why do those members opposite in the government refuse to support DPAs? Why? Because it was our suggestion. Because it was our suggestion. This lot, they are so politically driven by ideology that they just will not accept a good idea if it's being put forward by us. Those members opposite need to wake up to themselves and look at the good that can be brought to bear against bribery and corruption. Listen to yourselves. Go and replay the tapes that you talked about at the last election. Listen to what you said about accountability and transparency. It'd be really interesting to see if we hear any Teals talking on this bill. The Teals that talked so high and mighty about integrity and accountability and holding governments to account. Let's see what the Teals have to say about holding the government to account on introducing or agreeing to the amendments that we're moving in relation to the deferred mechanism, the deferred prosecution mechanism. This is an opportunity for the government to do the right thing, to do the sensible thing, and I'm looking forward to listening to the member for Wills, who's going to make a contribution where he'll stand up, he'll put his hand on his heart and say, "We got it wrong. This is what we'll do." Good submission by Mr Wallace. We will accept, and we will accept the recommendation and we will accept deferred prosecution agreements because that is the sensible way to go.